Hello! Welcome to this week's video. For this week, I'm going to be doing my wrap-up for the month of April. As you may have noticed, I did not have a wrap-up for the month of March because March was a bit of a reading dud month for me, and I was reading a book in March that I hadn't quite finished yet, so I thought, since I would not have really any books to talk about in March, I would just sort of carry that one book that I was reading into the month of April, which is what we are going to be doing now. A much better reading month in April. I had my ebook was good, but something kept it from being great, and we'll talk about that. Two ebooks, actually. The ebook that I was reading in March that I didn't finish was okay. Another ebook was good. Audiobook for the win. I got a fantastic audiobook that I read at the beginning of a series that I will be continuing, and paperbacks for the win. Definitely a much better reading month than March. So this one may be a little bit of a longer video, but y'all know me, I like to talk. And the way that we're doing these now is they will be spoilery. Ish. Some I might talk completely about, some I might not. I don't know how, I don't know. I'll know when I get there in the book. I don't know, if I want to talk to you guys about how it ends or but just consider all my book reviews from now on to be spoilery. Unless when I'm talking about it, I'm like, oh, I really don't want to tell you guys what happens because reasons. But yeah, I don't know. But just assume that they're going to be spoilery because I need to talk about them. So yeah, we're going to start with the book that I was finishing in March that I had not finished, and I ended up not finishing, actually, and that is Through Streets Broad and Narrow by Gemma Jackson. And this is a book set in around the 20s of in Dublin, and the main character is Ivy, and she has lost her father. Her father has died, and he was a drunk, and he was just not a very good father. I think her mother had died years before, and she was pretty much left raising their, I think she had two brothers, that, and yeah, so she was pretty much the one who, ran the whole house and took care of everything while Daddy was off getting drunk. And, so he dies and leaves her penniless, and, she meets this woman, Anne-Marie, at, the morgue, Anne-Marie actually works at the morgue, when she's getting her father ready for a burial that she cannot afford. And Anne-Marie they become friends, and Anne-Marie sort of helps her figure out ways that she could, kind of improve her station and help herself financially get by and become successful. And I really liked their friendship very, very much. Anne-Marie is more high on the society scale than Ivy. She is more well-off than Ivy. And so, as opposed to just giving her charity, which Ivy doesn't want to accept, Anne-Marie sort of helps her with different schemes and ventures to sort of improve her lot in life. And there's also this friend of Ivy's named Gem, who this is a much nicer Gem than the jackass in Daffodils that I read a few months back. And this Gem is much nicer. And he definitely has feelings for Ivy. He's a porter, and one of the people that he's ferrying around is this horrible, horrible woman who is, she's riding with her niece, and as they're riding through the street, a riot breaks out, and the horrible woman dies. Gem doesn't want this poor girl, Emerald, yeah, I think that's her name, Emerald, to get sent to an orphanage, so he and Ivy figure out a way to hide the aunt's body so that nobody knows that she died and that this child is now alone. So he decides that he's going to keep the child and adopt the child, and so that she doesn't get sent to a horrible orphanage. And once that sort of happens, it's all great, and then, like, after that, it sort of drags, like, a lot. Like, we see Ivy sort of living her life in the village. I was kind of hoping that we would see her flourish kind of like more, become like more successful and higher up in the society, but she sort of just becomes like slightly above poverty and just kind of comfortable. And her relationship with Gem was nice. You can definitely see the romance there starting to happen. But I just thought it like really dragged after they adopted, or after Gem adopted Emerald, and Gem that adopted her. I don't think it was the two of them together. Ivy helped, but Emerald, like, she was Gem's. And I did like Ivy's butting heads with the priest. Yeah, I liked her telling off the priest, Father Leary, I think his name was, who was just this sanctimonious piece of shit, who was one of those, like, you should have, given me, quote unquote, the church. He said, you should have given the church the money to say a mass for your father. And even though the father was trash, they all knew the father was trash. But, of course, the priest wanted the money for the church, quote unquote, to put actually in his own pocket. So, when Ivy doesn't do that, he's like the priest is like bad-mouthing her, like, all over town. There's this, busybody named Sheila Purcell, who is also a judgy bitch, and I believe might have been having an affair with the father. So there's that. And she's just horrible to Ivy, and also is like slandering her all over town. And there are people who believe the priest and Sheila and their ridiculousness, and there are people who are on Ivy's side, and that's nice. But yeah, apart from that, nothing really happens. And it's funny, because, like, I read, after I skipped, like, I sort of, like, skimmed the rest, and that, Ivy starts a business where she's, like, making dolls. And that's nice. That's great. Good for her. Good for Ivy. But, it was too slow for me. It dragged. I was not interested enough to read the rest of the series, because this was the first book in a series. So, yeah, what did I give it? Yeah, I gave it like 2 stars. It was nice. There were words. Things happened, but not enough things happened. to make me want to continue with the series, unfortunately. Next we have a paperback win, which I'm not really surprised that this was a win, because she is an auto-buy author for me. And that is historical romance goddess Lorraine Heath. And I read Once More, My Darling Rogue, which I loved, but the ending disappointed me a little bit. Not my favorite Lorraine Heath, but I liked it immensely. We have Ophelia, who is a high society girl, and she was raised by a piece of shit father who drummed into her that she is only ever supposed to marry a nobleman. And we have the hero Drake, who was not born into high society, but he is part of this. He's the hero of like part of a series of these boys who get adopted, I guess, by this woman named Franny Darling, who is a high society woman, and raises him, adopts him, and she makes him a duke. She marries a duke, so Drake is accepted into the high society people because his adopted father is a duke. So he's sort of raised among them, but always, like, never, like, 100%, like, accepted by them, because he's not a, I guess, pure-blood nobleman. So, for that reason, Ophelia, who is attracted to him, has to keep him sort of at arm's length and not give in to her feelings for him, because he's not a true nobleman. So she sort of does her best to, like, put him off and, like, resist her feelings for him, because her father drummed into her head that her attraction is any sort of, like, sexual desires or whatever that she may have is sinful, and that disobeying him is a sin in the eyes of God. So she is just horrible to Drake. Just absolutely horrible. And you know how much I hate bitchy heroines. However, I should have known. I should have known that I can trust my Lorraine Heath. Because Lorraine Heath did a brilliant job of giving us her point of view, Ophelia's point of view, and that's a lot of, I find that in a lot of, like, different sort of romances, or even, like, fantasy books, or, like, romantic suspense books, where, like, the heroine is, like, bitchy for no, in my opinion, no, like, good reason. So that's why I hate bitchy heroines. I hate kick-ass bitchy heroines who are just, they're tough and they're angry. And those are their two contributing personality traits. That's all they are. They might have a nice moment, like, here and there, but their default setting is bitchy and angry, and I hate those heroines with a passion of 1,000 burning suns, because those authors equate strength with anger. And they think that an angry woman is a strong woman. And that's just wrong, in my opinion. But Lorraine Heath gives us, like, fantastic sort of insight into her, and we see that Ophelia is doing this because, or behaving this way, because her father was just horrible to her and would literally, like, beat and starve her until she would behave how he wanted her to behave. So we do get, Drake is attracted to her as well, but he hates that he's attracted to her because he thinks of her as like this shrew who is just always like horrible to him. But he can't fight his attraction to her. She can't fight his attraction to her attraction to him, and they have this kiss. And then like Ophelia takes off and runs back to her home, where someone comes to her door. We don't know who, but they attack her, and they dump her in the river, where Drake finds her. He's out walking, and he finds her in the river. And then she comes to, and doesn't remember anything. She doesn't remember who she is. She doesn't remember who he is. She doesn't remember nada. I didn't like that when she came to, that she was still this, like, uppity, sort of rude shrew. But I think that it was sort of like that wall was like so high up for her, like that's her protective wall, that even sort of amnesia couldn't get rid of it entirely. So because she's still this like bitchy little shrew, Drake decides that he's going to get back at her by telling her that she's his servant. So, yeah. He runs a gambling hall, that's sort of like another reason why Ophelia thinks that she needs to stay away from him, because, like, gambling is sinful. And he makes her, so she's there, she's staying at his house, she's his servant, he makes her bathe him, and they both enjoy that. He makes her bathe him, though, just because, like, he wants her to, like, think that she's his servant, and he tells himself that he's just gonna do this one thing. He's just gonna do this one thing where she has to bathe him, and it's, like, so, like, scandalous that when he sends her back, and she surely will, like, get her, he'll tell her the truth about herself tomorrow, and when he sends her back, it'll knock her down a peg, because, he'll know, and she'll know, that she has, bathed him, and, like, seen him naked, and, that scandal will keep her now from being too uppity with him, because they'll both know that about each other. So that's his plan. So he goes to his, after the bath that they both enjoyed, he goes to, a little too much, he goes to his gaming hall, which, he spends, like, all, like, his nights there. That's where he, like, works, and his, I guess he, like, sleeps during the day, and he works at night at the gaming hall. And he sees her brother there. And her brother does not seem in the least bit worried about the fact that his sister was not at home, and has apparently gone missing. He doesn't seem worried about it in the least. So Drake starts to wonder, did the brother have something to do with her attack? And was he trying to kill her to get her dowry? The money that she was supposed to have for when she got married. Like, Drake starts to think that maybe the brother had something to do with it. He gets home, and she has this horrible nightmare, and he comforts her, and he starts having the feels. He starts having the feels for her in this, like, wonderful, beautiful moment where he helps her through this nightmare that she's had. He has this wonderful relationship with his adoptive mother, Franny, and you get these moments where he sees sort of how different Franny is with her husband compared to what he remembers from his own parents. And his father actually murdered his mother after, like, being in a just horrible, abusive piece of garbage. The father actually murders the mother. And it was so, like, nice to have that moment where you're seeing Drake comparing the two. So Franny totally knows about Drake's feelings for Ophelia, even though, like, he tries to, like, deny it or whatever. At the end, like, Franny totally knows. Ophelia meets this maid, Marta, who is a maid for, like, the next door, like, estates, like, you can, like, imagine, like, the distance between, you know, the estates, but we'll just call it next door. And I love the friendship that grows between these two. And Marta sort of helps her with cleaning the estate, because clearly Ophelia knows nothing about being a servant. She doesn't know how to clean a house, because she's not a servant. She doesn't know that. But she thinks that she's supposed to, because Drake told her that she's a servant. So Marta helps her learn how to clean the house. She's dusting a shelf or something, and of course she's up on the shelf, and she's up on the ladder, and Drake comes in, and of course she falls, but he catches her, and they share a kiss, which triggers a memory for her of, like, their first kiss. You get to see, like, Ophelia, what she's like with her walls down, and it's so, like, nice, and she's, like, sweet and funny, and of course Drake is falling in love with this Ophelia that he sees with her walls down. One of my favorite lines in this book, one of my funniest lines, is Marta and Ophelia go shopping, and Ophelia is so used to, like, just spending her money and just buying whatever, like, she wants. And Marta tells her that she should save her pennies for a rainy day. And Ophelia says, "Do you shop when it rains? Like, why do you shop when it rains? Are the prices cheaper then? Are the prices better then?" I died. I tried very hard not to laugh out loud in my break room at Evil's day job. Yeah, I love that line. There's this moment where Ophelia sees this man beating on a horse, and she, like, goes straight for him and is like, "How dare you?" And she, like, I think he hits her, but yeah, I think Drake is with her at that time, and I think he nearly kills the guy. But Ophelia begs him to, like, buy the horse from the guy, because, you know, Drake can pretty much only do so much because the horse is the guy's property, but Ophelia's like, please buy him so that we can get that horse away from that guy. And Drake, of course, is becoming a simp for Ophelia, a simpering little darling fool for this woman. So, of course, he buys the horse, and Ophelia starts, like, adopting, like, all these, like, different animals. and like strays, and it could be, people could be thinking like, oh, it's a little cliche or whatever, but I don't care. It was cute. I loved it. It was adorable. At some point, he tells her the truth about his parents and how his father killed his mother, and how because of that, like, even though he's been like adopted into nobility, he knows that he's not a nobleman, and he's broken, and he's dirty, and he has like evil blood in him, so he will never marry and never plans to have children, and it's all very Duke of Hastings Bridgerton. So yeah. A gaming hall that he works at is actually owned by his adoptive parents. And they let him buy it from them because they tell him that they're going to sell it, and he doesn't want them to sell it. He wants to keep running it, but they end up selling it to him, which he's like very, very happy about. And it's like a really like beautiful moment. And to celebrate, he and Ophelia do the thing. They do the thing. They have the sex. Now, I can just hear the politically correct, woke people going, oh, he should have never had sex with her. She was not like in her right mind. He was stealing away her agency, which is such a buzzword that, like, shut up. Though I will say, I don't disagree completely. However, they just go overboard with like, oh, he's problematic because he took away her agency because she wasn't in her right mind and blah blah blah. And I can just go on rants for that for days because they could have like legitimate points, but they're so obnoxious about it that you just shut their point out. The way some deliver their points about this kind of stuff is so off-putting and obnoxious that it's just like, you know what? Just shut up. Just shut up. Did I think that I would have liked if their first time that they made love was after she had regained her memory and, because it wasn't like on like an honest footing of the two of them, their feelings for each other were real. But she didn't have all the information about herself. So I could see their point, but I would hate how they make their point, kind of thing. Like, if that makes any sense. They have the sex, and he discovers, somehow, because, of course, there's only one way that a woman could be a virgin, or, like, not be a virgin. There's only one way to possibly tell that. But, for story's sake, he discovers that she's not a virgin, which I was not expecting. And I really like that he's not angry about the fact that she wasn't a virgin. He's concerned that she wasn't a virgin because that might mean that she is actually involved with somebody, that she has a suitor that he doesn't know about, but she just doesn't remember him. So he's just worried that she's in love with somebody else. they have a mutual friend, Grace, who, it's funny sort of in the beginning, because Drake is friends with Grace and respects Grace a great deal, and Grace is friends with Ophelia, and Drake doesn't understand this because he thinks that Ophelia is a superficial, rude shrew. So he doesn't understand somebody that he loves and respects, how they can be friends with this person. But Grace shows up at his house and is all like in a panic because nobody's heard from Ophelia in like the longest time. So she's worried about the fact that her friend is missing. It's when Ophelia sees Grace that her memory comes back. I thought that was a little, like, I would have expected it to be when they had the sex, because that seemed like a more, like, monumental moment. But no, it's when Ophelia sees Grace that her memory returns. Okay. So her memory comes back. She is understandably pissed at Drake and doesn't want to hear any of his apologies or explanations, and she leaves the house with Grace. Totally get it. She's totally in the right. She gets her memory back, but she still doesn't remember how she ended up in the river. She doesn't remember who attacked her, what happened, how did she end up in the river. She remembers who she is, but she doesn't remember. She's still blocking that out. Grace, of course, being friends with Drake, urges Ophelia to hear him out. She's like, I understand he's been a total ass butt, but I can see that you're in love with him, and I know that he loves you, so you should, like, I think you should go talk to him. And so Ophelia goes to hear Drake out, and he apologizes for, like, what he did, and he begs her to forgive him, and he tells her that, like, he's in love with her, and it's as they're having this sort of, like, back and forth fight about, like, what he did and how angry she is about it, and understandably so, that she starts talking about, like, somehow it gets to talking about, like, her past, and she mentions about, like, her uncle, and he figures out, because of her nightmares, he had figured out that something happened, somebody hurt her, and as they're talking and fighting, he figures out that her uncle had raped her, and her uncle had raped her repeatedly as a child, like when she would go over to, when her parents or her father would, like, take her over to go visit her uncle, her aunt and uncle, the uncle would rape her. And it turns out that the person who had come to the house was the uncle who was asking her to go back to come back with him to the house. This was like, she's an adult now, and the uncle comes and is asking her to come back to the house to help her aunt who is ill. So, for the aunt's sake, she goes with the uncle in the carriage, and the uncle sort of lets it be clear that they're gonna pick things up right where they left off when she was a child. So Ophelia jumps out of the carriage. She runs away from her uncle, jumps out of the carriage, and jumps into the river. So it wasn't that she was necessarily attacked. She jumped into the river to save herself from this rapey piece of shit uncle. But she still feels guilty about this aunt, leaving this aunt who is sick, who she loves this aunt. So Drake agrees to go with her to the uncle's estate to get the aunt and bring her to Ophelia's house to take care of her, so that, one, Ophelia doesn't have to go there alone, and Ophelia doesn't have to stay there. Drake, when he sees the uncle, punches him, and I would have liked to have seen Drake beat him more, but Ophelia stops him because she doesn't want him, of course, to be a murderer and end up going to be executed. And so Drake stops for her sake. But what Drake does do is tell the uncle that basically he's going to destroy him financially. He's like, I can't kill you because she doesn't want me to, but you are ruined. You are ruined in society. I will make sure that none of your businesses succeed. I will make sure that your name is mud in society. You will be absolutely ruined. And so the uncle kills himself. And we are happy about that. Would have been nice if he was murdered, tortured, and murdered, but we have to keep Drake safe, so he kills himself. Dead is dead. And it turns out that the aunt wasn't ill because of any illness. The uncle was poisoning her. And his plan was that he would poison her. Ophelia would come to the house to take care of her. The aunt would eventually die, and the uncle would keep Ophelia there and just to be his, to do with as he will. So we are very happy that he's dead. Once the aunt gets away from the uncle and away from the regular poisonings, she starts to recover. There's a point where I think it's Drake's carrying her out of the house, and the husband has just killed himself, and I think they talk about the fact that he's dead now, and the aunt says something along the lines of, "Good, I never liked him anyway." And I really liked that moment. Ophelia goes to visit Marta, and it's such a sweet moment, because Marta now knows that this is a high society woman who is come to see her, and she feels that their stations are now completely different, so of course they can't be friends anymore. And Ophelia's like, of course I'm still gonna be your friend, I don't care what people say, kind of thing. And it's such a nice evolution of Ophelia's character once she's sort of allowed to be herself without those walls up. She goes back to Drake's house for, I don't remember for what, but she gets Marta to let her in Drake's house for some reason. I don't remember what it was for, but she sees that now that she's gone, he's decorated the house in the way that she gave him ideas for when she was there, on how to make it look nicer and do this, decorate it this way and that way, and she sees that he's listened to all her ideas, and he's there, she's still there when he comes back, and they have this lovely moment, and they have the sex. And see, this moment I like better, because yes, again, I would agree with the people who have a problem with the fact that they had sex when she did not remember anything. This moment is not that, because she knows who she is now. She has she has all the knowledge. She has all the agency. But it's good. It's good. She kind of thanks him for showing her that she has nothing to be ashamed of in terms of, like, her sexual desire for him, or, like, just having sexual desires as a human, which, of course, she was made to feel ashamed of thanks to Uncle Rapey Pants and her father, who is dead, I believe. Yes, he's dead. And we're happy about that. And the uncle is dead, and we're happy about that. So they make love, but she is not ready to be with him yet. Like, she's still mad about what he did, understandably, and she's like, you know, thank you for letting me experience this with you, of, like, letting me, like, have these, like, sexual desires and, like, giving into them and showing me that I have nothing to be ashamed of, but I'm just not ready to be with you. Which I would have, you know, thought of, like, oh, like, come on already, like, it's almost like the end of the book, and, you know, this, like, the third, I think it's like the third act conflict or something like that. But it actually worked out well, because you get to see Ophelia kind of, like, move about in society now without those walls. And she becomes, like, more herself and kind of stronger for herself. So that was really nice. I really liked seeing that. And Drake is sort of, like, apart from himself too, and he's, like, missing her, but he's, like, really busy with, like, getting the gaming hall kind of ready for the opening night with him as, like, the new owner. And on the opening night, she comes there, and she tells him that she loves him, and I really, really thoroughly enjoyed immensely how, like, she goes to him and she tells him that she loves him and that she's forgiven him. And I actually thought the bit with the amnesia, and, like, as enjoyable as it was, I did think that it dragged a little bit. Like, it took a long time for her to get her memory back. I would have liked it if she got her memory back sooner, but that's pretty much my only complaint about it, and the fact that I would have liked if they hadn't had sex until after she had regained her memory and forgiven him. But I'm not, like, up in arms about it. Like, I know certain people would be. And yeah. So I gave it 4 stars. And it's just those 2 little, like, nitpicky things that kept it from being, like, a 5-star for me. So, not my favorite Lorraine Heath, but I low-key loved it. Not high-key loved it, I low-key loved it. Next we have ebook for the win. A little bit. Again, a little bit. But better than I've had previous ebooks being. And it's 7 Days by Ariel Atwell. So we have James and Catherine, and they are, it's a historical. We have James and Catherine, and they are young sweethearts, and her family definitely does not approve, so they're kind of, like, running around in secret, and he goes off to fight in the war, and she promises to wait for him, but while he's overseas, he finds out that she's married his cousin Charles. What the what? So he is understandably angry at our Catherine. And my thought was that, did she marry Charles because she got pregnant? And because James is like off in the war, and she didn't want her parents to know that they were together because they didn't approve, does Charles offer to marry her because she's pregnant? Not exactly. Not quite what happens. But we'll put a pin in that. We'll come back to that later. So, James is understandably angry, and years later, he finds out that Charles has died and left Ophelia in a shit ton of debt. And he buys that debt and tells Ophelia that she can pay it off with him by being his little sexy time friend for 7 days. So, Catherine, of course, still loves James, and James, of course, still loves Catherine, but will they have a conversation about, for why you marry when I in army? No, of course they won't, because words, what are those? Using your words? We don't know her here. So they engage in some fun, sexy times. And one of my favorite scenes is the sex education scene with her pretending like not to know. It's sort of like a role play teacher-student thing where he's teaching her about sex. And it's like a very cute, fun scene. She has a dream. While she's there, she has a dream about being raped by 2 men. And in her dream, one of them is Charles. So we don't know if this is a memory or just a nightmare, which in books, usually not just a nightmare. So, yeah. And James, of course, comforts her, and you see that, of course, he still loves her, and it's, like, so sweet how he is with her, and how, like, gentle and comforting he is to, like, help her, like, get through this clearly horrible nightmare that she's had. There's one scene that I had to read this scene, like, 4 or 5 times, because I just did not understand what was happening. After, like, 4 or 5 times of reading this scene, I want to think that it was another role play thing, where Catherine is pretending to be a maid, and James is like her lord, who like is like taking advantage of this maid. However, he talks about the fact that he's taking this maid, and Catherine is asleep upstairs. I don't understand this scene. Yeah, that scene made no sense to me. I did not understand what was happening. But we'll just pretend that scene didn't happen, because I didn't get it. So Catherine then has another nightmare, where we learn that the previous nightmare, not a nightmare, it was a memory. And Catherine actually was raped by Charles and this other dude, and that she goes to the father because Charles comes and wants to marry her, and she's like, hell to the fuck no. He and this other dude raped me, and Charles is like, no, it was consensual, and the father, of course, believes Charles, because the father is a piece of shit, and forces her to marry Charles. Because I think she discovers that she's pregnant, and then the father's, of course, in uproar, because, oh my god, my daughter had sex, and women having sex outside of marriage, oh my god, she's a dirty whore. And then Charles comes and is like, I'll marry her, and then Catherine is like, oh, to the fuck no, because you raped me, and this other dude did too, and I'm pregnant because you raped me. And the father, of course, does not believe her, and so he forces her to marry her rapist. You know, like a Republican. But so we get that question answered. And as the book goes on, I really like how James and Catherine's like relationship kind of like evolves and grows like warmer and sweeter. And Catherine like becomes more confident and actually becomes the initiator in one of the sex scenes. I did not be overly thrilled with when she talks about the fact that James is like this Adonis of a man who's like has like the perfect body and like is like a god, and she compares him to Charles, who was, you know, paunchy and like, you know, more like heavier than James. And I don't like and I'm starting to like it less and less when authors do that, because you're equating him having like a gut or being a little more heavy set with shorthand for, of course he was evil, because he wasn't this beautiful male specimen. So I did not like that, and I'm starting to like that less and less when authors do that. I also did not like her talking about this young girl who had a crush on James, and how Catherine is talking about her being awkward and ugly. I really did not like that. And yeah, if it had been earlier in the book, I probably would have DNF'd it right there. Because and if we hadn't had like more of her, Catherine is like a good person, I probably would have DNF'd it there, because I really, really do not like when a heroine puts down another woman like that. Really, really hate it. And it just felt cruel in my opinion, and I'm getting more and more angry about it the more that I think about it right now. So everything is like lovely and like they're getting, you know, closer, and yet for some reason James decides to ruin it all by bringing in a servant named Daniel to join in on one of their sex games. And I just realized that this was so much more wrong for two reasons. One, Catherine is not on board, because she thinks that they're moving to like a better place, and that they're actually like growing closer, and like that they actually like maybe have a future together, and that he's forgiven her for something that she was not at fault for. And then he turns around and brings in this guy And he's acting like, oh, are you, like, what, you thought that the game was over? You thought that, like, this is still just a game, and, like, what, you thought that, like, there were real feelings involved? And like, you can see that he's saying all that because he wants to push her away, because he's afraid of, you know, giving his heart to her again and having her, like, stomp on it and all that stuff. But it pissed me off because I think, like, for the reader, you learn that what happened with Charles, and that, like, she did not betray James, like, at all. But I think at this point, James doesn't know that. But still, they were clearly moving towards this good place, and he goes and derails it all by bringing in this Daniel. And they try and, like, make it like, oh, she ends up enjoying it, so it's okay. No. In my opinion, still not okay. Especially when you factor in that she was raped by 2 people. She was raped by 2 men. So to bring her in on a threesome, and yes, she says that, you know, I'm yours to, like, do whatever you want with. Yes, like, she said that she has no choice in the matter, blah, blah, blah. But they were moving towards a better place. And he just went and, like, completely blew that up. So after that happens, they get into this fight where she finally, like, spills all and is like, this is what happened, and I didn't betray you. Charles had raped me, and I was forced to marry him, and blah, blah, blah. And that was a really, really good fight. However, she then ruins it all by apologizing to him for ruining their last day. I could not, like, no. No, no, no. He's the one who brought in another guy to ruin what was clearly a reconciliation that was happening between the 2 of you. But because James, did not have the balls to accept that the 2 of you could actually find a way back to each other, and were finding a way back to each other, because James was a coward, he brought in this guy to use you, and you're apologizing to him? After that, I sort of skimmed the rest, because she, you know, leaves and goes, and is like, that, yeah, I'm sorry for ruining our last day, and then, like, she leaves, and, like, they're apart for, like, a little bit. He finds out that the other dude that raped her is threatening to take her son, and the only way that she can keep that from happening is if she agrees to marry James, who at this point has realized that he's been an ass butt and wants to make it up to her, but she's like, no. But then it's like, oh, if we don't get married, then they're going to take my son away, so okay, fine, I'll marry you. But it's sort of like, it's a marriage not because she wants it, but because she feels that she has to marry him to keep her son. So it's sort of a arranged marriage kind of deal, even though they have these happy pants feelings for each other and love each other. And she does end up forgiving James. But the whole bringing the 3rd guy in ruined the story for me. And, yeah, I was just very, very disappointed by that ending. So I gave it 3 stars. Next we have a Harlequin Desire, Contract Wedding Expectant Bride by Yvonne Lindsay. I DNF this book. And usually, with like certain DNFs, if they just don't work for me, I don't really like talk about them and I just like move on. But with certain DNFs, I feel rage and want to tell you about it. So with this one, I felt the rage. First off, loved the writing style. Loved it really, really, like, totally, like, immersive. Got me in the story. Great beginning. We have the hero Rocco, who is the, like, king of, like, a fictional kingdom, and he has to marry and produce an heir within a year. Then we have Octavia, who is a heroine, who is the heroine, and she is a courtesan, but she's not a courtesan who offers sex. She's not one of those dirty whore kind of courtesans. She's a special courtesan. She's a good, I don't know if you can see that, Halo Angel. She's a good courtesan, or bad courtesan, if you're being technical about it, who doesn't offer sex services. Yeah, I see what you're doing there, Harlequin. I see what you're doing there, and fuck you. But I believe that this is a part of a series, and in this book, she's being held there at the kingdom, and she enters into a contract with Rocco to be his courtesan. I DNF'd it because of the blatant slut-shaming. And how Rocco has disregarded other brides because they weren't virgins or they slept around. So, fuck you, Rocco. So, he, of course, fights his feelings for Octavia. But I guess we're supposed to think that Octavia is a better candidate than those other whores who actually had, sex and wanted to, like, actually believed that they should have the right to sleep with whomever they wanted, or, who had positive thoughts about sexuality. But we're supposed to believe that, I guess, that Octavia is a better candidate because she doesn't lower herself to actually having sex with the people who are paying her. I don't know what she does with them. Does she play chess with them? Do they have a book club? Does she go fishing with them? Does she, like, what? Does she, like, sew their clothes? Does she play Wordle with them? I don't, like, what? What does she do as a courtesan that she's not having, like, she's not doing her job. She's not doing what a courtesan is. Like, that's not a courtesan. Don't make her, like, make her something else. Like, what the fuck? Yvonne Lindsay. What the fuck, Harlequin? But of course, Rocco is going to think, as any normal person would, that she's a courtesan, so of course he can't marry her because dirty horse. And so he's going to think that, and then, like, in the last minute, he's going to learn that she's a special courtesan who doesn't actually have sex with her clients. So she's not that dirty whore. So, OMG, you're pure. I can marry you. Yay! Just, I DNF'd it after, it was like 1 or 2 chapters where she mentions that she's a courtesan, but, like, you in her point of view, they shouldn't say it, but, that she's a courtesan, but doesn't actually have sex with the clients. That's when I DNF'd it. Yeah. Just fuck Rocco. Fuck Octavia. Fuck Yvonne Lindsay. Fuck Harlequin. So, yeah, that was no. Just very, very much no. And my final book, my audible for the win, was Sophie Lark's The Heir. Thank you to Jen at the Book Refuge for putting this book in my brain. She is one of my favorite romance booktubers, and she loves her some Sophie Lark. And I love hearing her talk about Sophie Lark's books because they make me want to read Sophie Lark's books. And Sophie Lark is all about the Mafia. And I am here for that. You all know that. If you have read my Mafia romance series, Blood Vows, book 4 is coming, I promise. I'm almost finished. I'm like this close to finishing the first draft, Will's story. I'm almost there. But I love me some Mafia romance. And so as soon as I saw Jen's video talking about Sophie Lark's Mafia Kingmakers series, I think it's called, and how it's centered around a school for Mafia children where you learn to Mafia. And instantly, my ears went, "Pah?" I was like, Britney Spears, gimme more. I want all the informations. So, we have Leo and we have Anna, who have just graduated high school. And are they going to Yale? No. Are they going to Harvard? No. They are going to Kingmakers because they are Mafia. They are children of Mafias. And I adore how it's almost, you could almost call this a fantasy novel, but there are no elves or dragons. It's contemporary, but it's a completely made-up world. This school. What do they call it? Hogwarts for Mafia. And I'm not sure if it was Jen that called it that, or it was somebody that I read that called it that. But, yeah, Hogwarts for Mafia. And I'm like, I know of Harry Potter. I haven't read Harry Potter. I think I saw 1.5 movies. Still need to see more. I don't hate it. I like it. But I'm not, like, in the fandom. But I do get the reference. And I agree. So I went to check if the book was on Audible, and it was. Thank you very much. Absolutely loved the first book. We have Leo and we have Anna, and they've just graduated high school, and they're off to this not magical, but this fictional school that will teach them how to Mafia. And Leo is this likable, kind of cocky. At the beginning, you definitely see I'm usually not a fan of those sort of like long, kind of like drawn out beginnings. And the first time you see Leo, it is at this basketball game. And normally, I would not like that this basketball game seemed to be going on for a very long time. And I would mostly just like want them to like get on with the story. But in my opinion, Sophie Lark did so well in using that scene. Like, as you're reading it, you understand why we're starting with this scene. And how you get, like, this brilliant look into Leo's character at the beginning of this book. He is definitely, like, leader material. He is cocky. Too cocky. He is arrogant. He thinks that his way is always, like, the right way. And in any other, like, situation, I would have been like, it's dragging. Like, get on with it already. But kudos to Sophie Lark. She did a great, great job of using this basketball game to set up, to introduce you to Leo. And Anna is his very best friend in the world, and they have grown up together. And I think he had the chance to go to, like, one of the known universities, and I think his parents actually wanted him to go to not Mafia University, but he wanted to go because Anna was going, and he wanted her, like, he didn't want to leave her alone there. He wanted to go where she went. And Anna is this, badass little teenager, young woman, who wants to learn how to run her family's organization and to lead her family's part of the territory. And she, is definitely a strong character with some definite ideas of how she's going to run things when she gets a chance. Leo, he wants to, be a leader and be, like the head of his part of the family. And so they're both going to this school. One of the reasons that his parents do not want him to go to this school is because somebody else is going to this school. And that is... Why did I just blank on his name? Oh my god. I just totally blanked on his name! Daniel? Holy shit, I just blanked on it. I had it in my head like the whole time. Because I hate him. I'm actually going to have to do this. I cannot believe. Dean! Jesus! As a supernatural girl, I'm offended at myself. That I forgot his name. Yeah, I cannot believe that I forgot his name. Dean! Fucking Dean! Leo's parents are worried because Dean is also going to be at this Kingmakers University place. And Dean is the Dean is Leo's cousin. Leo's mother was Dean's father's sister. And there is some bad blood between those two families. I definitely want to read because the Kingmakers is sort of its own series, and the Heir, the one that I read, is book 1. However, it is connected to another series, I believe, where I hope, you get the parents' stories. So, you get like a good build-up of what happened with the parents and the bad blood between the two families. You get that information, but not sort of like in an info-dumpy way. Just in a way, for me, that would definitely want to read their stories of like what happened, because Dean's father is in a very bad shape. Very bad way. Like, whatever happened between those two families, grandparents were killed. I think Dean's mother, like, left. I don't think she died. I think she left. The father almost died. He was like all like, he was burned and scarred in some kind of fight that happened between the two families. So he is in a very, very bad place. And Dean, understandably, is not the most happiest of teenagers. We understand. And he's got a lot of anger. Dean is a very angry boy. And we get that. I understand. And Dean does all bad things. Does all the wrong things. They go to Kingmakers, and there's like rules about like, you can't, this is kind of like a quote unquote safe space. Although like some of the challenges that are given are like, could potentially kill you. But you're not allowed to fight with or like kill each other. Because if you do, then we as the school have the right to execute you. So, y'all bitching about schools in the olden days who like used to like strap you with like rulers and like belts and stuff. Please, sir, may I have another? No. This school, they're allowed to kill you if you break one of their rules. So yeah. I like, I adore Friends to Lovers, so I loved watching Leo and Anna, like, fall in love with each other. There was an interesting little development that happens because Dean also falls in love with Anna, and for a while, when Leo makes a huge mistake that he was not responsible for, it was Dean's doing, and Anna is like brokenhearted, so she starts to pay a little bit more attention to Dean, and Dean, of course, loves this because not only is he obsessed with Anna, but he's obsessed with destroying Leo. So, 2 birds, 1 stone. And I know that Dean gets his own book. However, what Dean does towards the end of the book, should I tell you? Should I not tell you? I don't know. I'm not going to. But what Dean does towards the end of the book makes me not want to read his book. Even though, like, I want to read his book, but I don't want to read his book. Because I don't want this son of a bitch to get a happy ending. But at the same time, I might, very small might, I don't know, be willing to go on the journey to where Dean gets a redemption. But what he does is so unforgivable, in my opinion. I will tell you this, he does not rape Anna, so if you're thinking it's that, no, it's not. Though there is one time where she's trying to object to, like, what he's doing, and he does, like, cover her mouth. I didn't like that. That was a little pushing of the potentially, is this going to be a rape moment. I did not like that at all. If he had done that, I might have, like, want him to be murdered. But what he does do, I still a little bit want him to be murdered. So, I don't know. I definitely want to read the rest of the series. I don't know if he's like a Sale to me in the Black Dagger Brotherhood, which I have no interest in the slightest of reading a Sale's book in the Black Dagger Brotherhood. Because he was a vampire who did a deal was working with the Lessers, who were the evil ones, and he was doing it so, like, for money, and he was, like, basically betraying his own kind just for money, and I did not care for him at all. I wanted him to die. So I have not read his book. But with Dean, like, you see sort of, you're in his head, and you see his pain, and you understand why he thinks that he should be doing what he's doing. And I think Sophie Lark does a fantastic job of showing us that. But I don't know. I don't know if I'm willing to go on the journey with Dean. I think I am. But I hated what he did. And I'm not in agreement with how okay Leo was with it. I would have liked either, like, Anna or Leo to have done something to this boy. Because he deserved to have had something done to him. But loved that book. So Audible was, like, definitely a win for me this month. Ebooks did better than previous months. Paperbacks, great. So I would call April definitely a win for my reading month. And yeah, so that is going to be it for this week's video. Oh, what am I reading right now? I am reading an old school book that I had fallen in love with as a young child before I should have been reading epic saga type romances, but I'm reading this one, and I found it again at my evil day job, which made me so happy and make all the happy book noises. It's Destiny by Sally Bowman. So it's a story about Edward and Helene, and I am so, it's a big, like, this is, like, quite small print. This is page 106 already of it's sort of like in the vein of, like, Judith Krantz, Daniel Steele, Sidney Sheldon, that kind of. This book is 800 pages, y'all. 800 small print pages. 100 pages in, a lot of shit has already gone down. So I am so on board, utterly enjoying it. Yeah, oh my goodness, that is not the end. I almost forgot. I finished my nighttime read. Paris by Edward Rutherford. Yeah, I liked it. I didn't love it as much as I loved other Edward Rutherford books. I found this one, and I have to go and like try and like remember if this is like a new development or if he's done this before, where I always found with Edward Rutherford, he writes historical fiction. And this is, the set of, this is like obviously like set history of Paris. And it goes through like different generations of different families. And I loved that about his books. However, I always remember them being linear. Like, you'd go from like the first family to the next generation to the next generation. This one, I didn't like how it jumped around. So, you'd like leave people in like 17 whatever, and then the next chapter you're skipped to like 1936, and then you're going back to like 18 this hundred, and then your next chapter you might be in like 1910. I really did not like that. It was hard to follow the flow of the characters and like their storylines. I would say the main sort of like villain is like this piece of shit named Luke, who has this like wonderful brother, but Luke is a piece of crap who causes all kinds of problems for his brother. He ends up like killing this girl and like hiding her body. This is all sort of like going around like as like the Eiffel Tower is like being built. And there's Louise, who like doesn't know who her family is, and I think she learns like what her mother's name is, but not like there's no family reunion like sort of like that I found. She just goes to like see this old woman, and the old woman like pretends not to know her, but then like you learn the old woman, like, when they're alone, she gets, like, all pissed at her and, like, how dare you come here and, like, try and, like, bring, like, your scandal, like, into my family and blah, 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 and, like, we will not allow you to, like, ruin our family because of, like, who you are and blah, blah, blah. And then there's, like, Marie, who, like, falls in love with this guy named Hadley, but her parents, like, I think they don't approve or something, and so they make it so that they talk Hadley into, like, leaving her, because he's not worthy. And then they meet each other, like, years later, where he has a son, and we'll just call him, like, Hadley Jr., who Marie is, like, attracted to, maybe because, like, she feels, like, that same vibe that she had, like, with the father. But her daughter wants him, and her daughter, Claire, is this bitch, in my opinion. I could not stand Claire, because the way that, like, she was with the mother when she knew that the mother was in love with this younger man, and Claire sort of, like, went out of her way to make sure that this younger man ended up with her and not her mother. And just, like, the smile that, like, she gives her mother when, she, like, wins Hadley Jr., I hated Claire. Marie and Hadley Sr. do meet up again, and I would have liked it that they ended up, like, being together after, like, so long being apart, but that didn't happen. She was just sort of like, oh, like, I was in love with you, and, he's like, yeah, I was in love with you too, but I wasn't, like, worthy of you, and, like, oh, like, how, like, journeys that are, like, our lives have taken, and, I think he even asked her, like, would you be willing to, like, give, like, us another shot? And she says something along the lines of, like, know, like, too much time has passed, and we're, like, different people now. And I'm like, Marie, you idiot! This was a man that you loved, you know, and, like, I would have wanted them to, like, be together, but that didn't happen. And I found, the thing I like about Edward Rutherford's books was that he was a fantastic historical fiction writer, but in a way that, like, it didn't feel like he was telling you about history. It wasn't, like, long, info-dumpy, reams of pages about, like, historical facts and, like, that stuff. This one, he got quite info-dumpy, I found. There were, like, long-ass paragraphs, like, pages of, like, him talking about, like, what was happening at that time in Paris. And even some of the dialogue was kind of, like, info-dumpy, where the character would be like, oh, you know, like, this is going on right now, but did you know that, like, in this year, whatever, this was going on? And, like, this book, like, did not work for me. And let me see what year this was from. 2013. So, I don't know if this is sort of like his new style right now, but if it is, I'm not on board. I liked his earlier, the pinnacle one that I loved is still Sarum, that I read from him. That is still my favorite that I've read of his books. So I don't know, like, if his more recent ones are, like, getting, like, more info-dumpy, more, like, jumping around from time to time, but I'm not on board. So this one, unfortunately, had some, like, good moments, but, like, when Luke finally gets his, and, like, the way that it happens, like, I think I can tell you what happens to Luke. His brother kills him. I was so happy when Luke finally died, and I was so happy that it was Thomas that did it, because, there's some, like, involvement with, like, the Nazis, and Luke becomes this, like, Nazi collaborator dude, and, yeah, I was so happy when Luke died. Because Luke, like, he drags Louise into, like, being this whore, but then, like, gets mad at her when, like, she actually, like, flourishes and, like, ends up running her own brothel and wants to, like, you know, take control of her own life, and he doesn't like that. So, yeah, I was very happy when Luke finally died. Yeah, so those are all of the books that I read in April. So, fantastic reading month. Some hits, some not so much hits. And oh, geez, now it was a good time to start that now because we're ending this video. They're starting doing construction in one of my apartments. That's going to be it for this week's video. Oosh, that was a long one, but I had a lot of books to talk about, and I had thoughts. So, long video. That's what happens. So, follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/authorejamie. Like my Facebook page at facebook.com/authorejamie. And I will talk to you guys next time.